Welcome back, guys, to the Spicy Takes NFL podcast. I'm Elijah. Caleb's with me today. Colton wasn't able to make it right now, so he'll be back in the next episode, and we may even have a little bit of an MLB special with him pretty soon. But for the time being, it's just me and Caleb, and today is just the NFL podcast. Of course, we're recording this Sunday morning at 8, so no games except for the Thursday night's game has been done, so all these predictions are going to be accurate, people. So about that Thursday night game,
Heineke, he looks good. I like Heineke.
as a Vikings fan, give me either Kirk at 40 million or Heineke, what he's going to get paid. I'll take Heineke. I know he's going to probably have a bigger payday than he's getting paid, obviously, right now. I think there's going to be some team that's going to take a shot on him. But like none of those balls were in bad spots. Like they weren't just like good receiver. Obviously, Terry McLaurin's a stud. My fantasy team's thankful for him. But I mean, he was leaving balls in the perfect spot every single time. That was not something that was a coincidence. That was just some really good quarterback play.
Yeah, I was impressed. I mean, I think he needs a little bit more time to whether you can define whether he's a starting quarterback or whether he's more like a Tyrod Taylor type of bridge quarterback. But
I mean, compared to what everyone thought last year when he got started against Tampa Bay, everyone's like, Washington's going to get their doors blown off of him. And he almost beat Brady, who went on and won a Super Bowl. So, I mean, last night.
At worst, he's an ideal backup. He might be one of the best backups in the NFL.
And I think I think he could be a really good bridge starter for a team that's wanting to get a quarterback in the draft the next year, but they don't want to tank the season. I think that he could be a great guy for that. I mean, Washington, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to keep him because the defense is so good, and I think he could be good enough to get them somewhere at quarterback if he just keeps this up.
And if he has a good relationship with the receivers, and if he can kind of keep that chemistry building up, you never know where they'll get.
Mm-hmm. I will say that Giants fans are going to be sick. I know that Giants fans can get mad about the offsides call on that field goal. The truth is it was offsides. Do I think it really affected the field goal? Probably not. But it wasn't offsides. Plus, the game should have come down to that. They had 2 touchdowns just completely dropped. And I don't blame any of that on Daniel Jones. I don't like Daniel Jones. I don't think he's a very good quarterback, but he played a fantastic game Thursday night against one of the better defenses in the league, in my opinion, in Washington. And he was leaving that ball that was dropped by Slayton.
Yeah.
I understand he was wide open, so Jones probably should have left it a little bit short. So he came back to it and he was still scored. But that ball was in a perfect place. If he just keeps running, he should have caught that, and it hit him right in the hands.
Yeah, I mean, as a receiver, he has absolutely nothing to complain about there. You catch that 99 times out of 100. That was like a practice ball. You know what I mean?
That cost him the game because if you score a touchdown there, Washington doesn't have a chance to win that game. So, But Terry McLaurin's a stud. Well, let's say that guy is all the hype. He's a superstar.
I'm very thankful for his 28 fantasy points. So
I am too, but I was disappointed that they kept using J.D. McKissic instead of Gibson. But
it's an interesting choice there. But so I wanted to ask a real quick question there based on the end of this. So how long do you think Joe Judge has before his favor runs out in New York? Do you think it's a him problem? Do you think it's a team composition problem? What do you think?
I think Joe Judge, I was very skeptical to hire at first. I think he's a very good coach. I do. I think he's like one of the only guys that Belichick disciple that I feel like actually has that leadership skill. I feel like a lot of Belichick disciples don't have that leadership skill because they are kind of just smooching off of Belichick.
Yeah.
But I think he's one of the only Belichick disciples that actually has that leadership. I think a lot of the reason they struggled was because of, the players just aren't playing. I mean, Saquon is not what he used to be, and it's been 3 or 4 years. Like, what are you supposed to do there? I mean, the running back's not the job of the head coach to get better.
I don't know what to think about Saquon. I mean, obviously has the injury thing right now, and then through last year, what he did play in the year before. I mean, you could argue that the Giants' offensive line is just, a steaming pile of dog crap, so that never helps.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. It's I feel like it's whatever, nothing against Saquon, but it's yet another lesson of not taking a running back that high in the draft. They're too reliant on other people.
I
I
mean,
mean,
I
running
understand.
back is
I mean,
it's the most dependent position in football because you have to have good offensive line play and you have to have a decent quarterback. Because if you're facing stacked boxes all the time, you're just not going to run the ball effectively, no matter how good a running back you are.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it also. I mean, but the thing is, I just don't see the explosiveness. I really usually injuries are getting to players at this point. I just don't see it into Saquon, which is weird because I was high on Saquon. I mean, his rookie year he looked great,
I
but
thought he was a generational talent, legitimately.
he is. I mean, I think he was. I think he's just got. I think injuries really have killed him, and also that defense is just very iffy. Like, they have some players, but they're just not a great cohesive unit.
They were great last year. They look worse this year through 2 games than they did last year through the entire 16. Because everyone thought that with bringing in Adoree Jackson on the other side of James Bradbury, they thought that they were going to end Xavier McKinney, the kid from Alabama, he was injured last year. So this is kind of like his first year basically starting at safety, which was an improvement over what they had last year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot of talent on that defense. I mean, they could be a little bit weak in the linebacker core, but if you ask Giants fans, because I've gone and looked on some forums, if you ask Giants fans, they think Blake Martinez is like fantastic. They're so thankful for him and acted like the Packers were stupid for letting him go. So,
I mean,
I don't
you're a
think
Packers fan. You know Blake Martinez's stat padding tackles, but
as well, he likes to make tackles 5 yards down the 5
yeah,
yards down the
5
field.
to 50, 5 to 10 yards on the field. But
Yeah, and he can't cover to save his life. But I don't know. He manages to get good PFF grades every year somehow. That's a lot of people's gospel. So
well, either way, I don't think it is, Judge. I think with the way the NFL is, it's what have you done for me lately? And if
yeah.
I can see that if they don't do well in the first, if they end up like 4 or 5 wins this year, I could see Joe Judge gone. I think it would be a mistake, but I think that 4 or 5 wins, he's probably gone. I think if he gets 6 or 7 wins, I think they might give him another year. And I think that it might just be Daniel Jones is gone. But
Yeah, just to really quickly comment on that, the only problem with that is I feel like though is you could go into a Matt Nagy situation where you're like getting rid of the quarterback, but then you're bringing in a new quarterback and putting him on the hot seat with an old coach, and I feel like that can really mess up a young quarterback.
yeah,
And it can also mess up how it goes because I mean, look, I feel like Matt Nagy is purposely at this point not playing Justin Fields just because he knows that it basically guarantees him another year next year. Because if they stink with Andy Dalton, well, I mean, everyone expects them to stink with Andy Dalton. You know, if the Bears get like 8 or 9 wins, people will be impressed with Andy Dalton, you know? But so if they wait to play him with Fields, if he plays him next year, basically guarantees that he gets next year with Fields. So he gets 1 more year in Chicago. So,
yeah, I agree. But so let's get on to some recap from last week. That was just the Thursday night game, was just a heck of a game. I thought we needed to talk about that. But so last week, it was a very interesting week. It was definitely week 1. Week 1s are always kind of crazy. There was a lot of surprising and disappointing teams from last week. I know for me, my most surprising team, honestly, I think it was Las Vegas. The Raiders looked very good. I will say I've always thought Derek Carr is a little bit underrated. I think the guy gets a lot of hate because John Gruden didn't like him. Is the main reason.
yeah.
And people were expecting John Gruden to come in and change the Raiders to a Super Bowl team. And I was always on the train of pump the brakes. He hasn't coached in 10 years. But
well, and there's a reason he got a 10-year contract. Everyone was surprised about that. And I was talking to a friend I remember back then. I told him it was the reason he got a 10-year contract because it could be a 10-year rebuild.
yeah,
Not because he's Mr. Fantastic. It's because I will give Oakland credit for this. They know that for a coach to instill his vision, it takes a long, long time to do that. A lot longer than NFL franchises want to give it credit for.
Well, either way, I think they were really impressive. I mean, to beat Baltimore in week 1 in a very crazy game in prime time, Derek Carr deserves a lot of credit. I'm sorry. That guy is a stud. Like, I think he gets a lot of hate. I think people are really, really quick to forget what he did a few years back before he got hurt. The Raiders were ended up 13-3, and but he got hurt in like a week 14. And he was on track to be an MVP candidate. And he gets hurt, and then the team kind of dissolves a little bit. But he's been the same guy ever since the injury still. It's just that the team just not been as good around him.
Derek Carr being a stud might actually be a bit of a spicy take. That's not a very popular opinion, I feel like. I mean, I'm not sure I'd go so far as calling him a stud. I think he's definitely an above average starting NFL quarterback, though. I'll give him that.
I mean, he's not getting paid a ton for most starting quarterbacks that have been in the league as long as he has. I mean, you can build a team around that contract still. Yeah. And I think he's on the same level as a Kirk Cousins, maybe a little bit higher than Kirk Cousins. And probably around the same level, maybe a little bit better. I mean, we've seen him actually. I mean, at least Kirk's won a couple playoff games, but Carr's not had a team around him to do it. Kirk's had a top 5 roster in the league most of his time in Minnesota, and he's won 1 playoff game. I mean,
right.
And I think that if you look at Carr, I think he's had a lot of really good years that are kind of overshadowed because the Raiders team in general isn't very good. I think he's kind of the opposite of Jared Goff, where Jared Goff was for a while getting propped up as this great quarterback, but it's because this whole team around him was absolutely loaded. And I think I think the same thing, I think the opposite thing can be said about Derek Carr. I think he wasn't getting the credit because his team around him was just not good. I mean, this Raiders team is the same team that was drafting Cleveland Farrell 4th overall when there were so many more. And then Alex Leatherwood this year, 19th overall, when he was a 3rd round projection. Like, they've not been drafting great. I mean, they've not been bad players, but they've not been those level of. I mean, Leatherwood could be great, but I mean,
well, Farrell's been pretty bad for a 1st round pick.
Like for a 4th overall pick, especially. But
yeah,
that's what I think that's why I think I'm so impressed with Vegas, because I think that Derek Carr showed who he really is and how good he really is. And I think that Raiders team's a little bit better around him this year to begin with. So I could see them being, I don't think they win that division because Kansas City and LA are both in that division. But I could see them running for a 7th seed this year.
Yeah.
They look what they did week 1, but obviously it's week 1. But
AFC is going to have a stacked playoff lineup. It'll be interesting to see.
Who's your most surprising team?
I mean, to be honest, I was kind of high on them, but I don't know if I was that high. I was impressed with the Broncos. I thought that so basically Denver and the Giants were like the same team last year for all intents and purposes. They both had defenses that were pretty good and offenses that just turned the ball over constantly and sputtered a bunch. And Teddy Bridgewater came in there and led a performance where, I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't remember seeing that they had a single turnover. I don't know if they turned the ball over once.
That's what Teddy Bridgewater does. I mean, he's never turned the ball over, which is
it's always nice, but I mean, he didn't look this good in Carolina last year. I don't know if Carolina just had inferior talent, or once they lost McCaffrey, that's kind of a big blow to any team, or I don't know what it is. I mean, I'll need to do some more kind of research on what's going on there, but I didn't think he was going to be that good for the Broncos in week 1.
I mean, I think when you have, if you look at Teddy back in Minnesota and in New Orleans, he always had some good receiver talent around him. I mean, Minnesota had Adam Thielen and at the time Stephon Diggs. And then in New Orleans, you have Michael Thomas when he was Michael Thomas. So, I mean, he has always had some really good receiver talent around him. Plus, he had Alvin Kamara in the backfield and Dalvin Cook in the backfield. Last year in Carolina, I think DJ Moore is good, but I don't think I put him on the same level as those other 3 receivers. And then without McCaffrey, I mean, Mike Davis played admirably last year at running back, but he wasn't Christian McCaffrey.
He's Mike Davis, yeah.
Huh?
He's Mike Davis.
Yeah, exactly. He's a running back. I mean, he's a good guy. He's a guy that's been in the league for a long time, but he's going to be a running back, just a normal
Yeah.
average running back. But I think because of that, they put a lot of pressure on Bridgewater to do more than what he's supposed to be. I mean, Bridgewater's never been considered a guy that's going to put your team on your back and carry you to a win. But he's been a guy that's going to never lose you a football game. And that's why I think that Minnesota, I think that's why Mike Zimmer loved in Minnesota. And that's why I think he's doing so well here in Denver, because in Denver, I mean, you got good receiver talent. I mean, obviously Jerry Jeudy went down, but you still have Cortland Sutton. You still have some other good wideouts around you. The guy from Penn State, what's his name?
Hamler.
Hamler, yeah, KJ Hamler. Like you have a couple of really good potential wideouts at least. You have Noah Fant, a tight end who's a solid tight end. So I mean, I think you got a good roster around them, and then that defense has been good for the last 10 years, but they just not had an offense to go with it.
It'll be interesting to see how that shakes out there.
Mm-hmm. What's your most disappointing team? I mean, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say. But
Well, it's the Packers. I was gonna go with someone else, but that's clearly
yeah, I'll let you
I
choose.
think-
I'll let
I-
you choose them as a fan. I'll choose a different one.
because like just to quickly comment on that has been talked about enough. That was just a stinker. You throw that turd and then down the sink and just be done with it and move on to this week, and we'll see what happens. I don't think there's anything else you can say than it was just a total beatdown, and you have to see how they respond, because
What do you think?
there's nowhere to go but up.
What do you think about the thought of some people? And I have a feeling I kind of believe it too, that Rodgers might be doing this just to get back, because I've never seen Aaron Rodgers play that bad. And I've seen him play his full career.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note he said that on the second interception, the one where he overthrew Valdez-Scantling by like 6 yards, he took a fist right to the nuts. He said it on the Pat McAfee podcast. So he took a fist right to the nuts as he was throwing the ball. So he like just launched that sucker after he got hit and didn't really know what was going on. So I definitely think that contributes, because I'd never seen Rodgers throw a ball like that either. And I did notice that he wasn't getting up after the end of that. So I guess that has probably has an effect. But I don't think he's purposely doing it just yet, because he's 38 years old. I
Yeah.
think Rodgers is smart enough to know that he doesn't have the years to be able to be like, oh, well, I'm going to choose to play like shit this year and then just, make the Packers wait on me to trade me and go where I want to go. He's just too old for that,
Yeah.
Maybe when he'd been like 28, if he was doing that, yes.
Mhm.
But I don't think if he is doing that, that is incredibly stupid on his part, because he's still getting hit and he's still getting clobbered out there and looking like a moron, all while, wasting another year of his career. So
Yeah.
he's a lot dumber than I give him credit for, if that's the case.
Mm.
But my most disappointing team, probably the Bills. I know it's a hard game against the Steelers, but
They got to win that game. The Steelers
yeah,
are as good of a team as they were last year at all.
I
And
don't know, man. Maybe, and this is kind of like if we had a week one overreaction segment, I'd be putting this in there. Do the Bills just not know how to win big games? The Bills remind me very much of the Packers of those early 2010s to 2015s games. We'd roll over people that were 8-8, 9-7 and stuff. And then we'd get curb stomped by good teams like Seattle and stuff, Pittsburgh doesn't even fall into that category of a good, like, Super Bowl contending team. They're a solid team for sure, but they're not. I don't think there's many people's. And the Bills don't have an excuse of, oh, we didn't start our starters. They played their starters for almost a full half against the Packers in week 3. Something that they need to improve on is learning how to win and how to get behind and how to be able to claw back into a game. I'm not sure if it's personnel or if it's the team or what.
That was definitely a disappointing game from Buffalo. They were one of my Super Bowl team. One of the teams I thought would be one of the best teams in the league. And I don't know if Josh Allen's gotten figured out or if it's just a rough game. It could just be a rough game. I'm thinking it probably is, because week 1.
Yeah.
Week ones are always kind of crazy, but I mean, it didn't look good. The offense did nothing.
Yeah.
For me, the most disappointing team, it's really hard for me to pick them as this. I mean, mine was going to be, I think Green Bay is, I think the consensus pick for the most disappointing for week one.
Oh yeah.
Minnesota was definitely disappointing. I wouldn't pick them as the biggest because I mean, I think I said in the last podcast that I thought, even though I thought Minnesota would beat Cincinnati at Cincinnati, I thought that it would not be surprised at all if they got beat because Minnesota just loses games like that. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
They just have just as good of a shot to beat Arizona today as they did Cincinnati. Not because Arizona's as bad as no, I think that Arizona's a lot better than Cincinnati, but Minnesota plays to their competition every single time they play them, which is frustrating. But I don't think that's the most disappointing team. I mean, I think the Cardinals are extremely good, and I think they're a dark horse contender. Um, but Tennessee got stomped in by Arizona. And Tennessee was so hyped up coming into the year. I know that a lot of that. I know Colton, for example, said that he didn't expect much from Tennessee because he did think that Julio Jones wasn't as good of a pickup as they were making it out to be. And he's a Falcons fan, so he's seen in the last few years.
Yeah.
But that was ugly. Like you got stomped in. The defense is as bad as they were last year, if not worse. Kyler Murray made that team look like a college team defensively.
Yeah.
And offensively, they didn't do anything. I mean,
That offensive line needs some work. I don't know what happened there because I don't know what the weak link is outside of that they're having tackle issues now, even though they supposedly had good tackles.
I mean, Taylor Lewan's one of the top 5 tackles in the league, and he came out and said he got his butt kicked by Chandler Jones, which is pretty obvious. I mean, you gave up 5 sacks in week one to a guy. I mean,
Yeah, that's hard to look at.
so I mean that's definitely scary because I don't think that Tennessee can do much if that O line's not great, and if that O line's not great, Tennessee could be at below 500 this year because I don't. Even though a lot of people are higher on Ryan Tannehill, I'm still not sold on Ryan Tannehill as a franchise quarterback. I know he's been good the last couple of years, but I feel kind of the same way about Ryan Tannehill as a lot of people do about Kirk Cousins, and I do too. In that he can get you some numbers, he can win you some regular season games, but what happens when you get into the postseason? He's not won anything in the postseason. I feel like he's just kind of an average quarterback and just being propped up by the rest of the team or by the rest of the guys around him. And this year, if the offensive line's as bad as they look like they were in week one, if the defense is bad they were in week one, it could be a rough year for Tennessee, which is kind of scary. It's just kind of sad knowing how good that they added Julio and it was like so hyped up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't think Ryan Tannehill is like a superstar or anything like that. I mean, Ryan Tannehill's saving grace is he's become surprisingly turnover reverse. So I'll give him that. But that's about it.
Well, so next order of business is so obviously we're talking about week one and obviously everything from week one to an overreaction every year. From what you saw in week one, who is your early MVP candidate and then a dark horse candidate that you think you saw?
Sheesh. I mean, an early MVP candidate. Is it too late to say Tom Brady? I mean, he's 44 years old and he's throwing 4 touchdowns. And I mean, the interceptions didn't look great, but one of them was at the end of the half anyway.
Yeah.
And in that offense, maybe even more wide open this year than it was last year. And MVP voters like players who have outstanding traits and characteristics for whatever reason, and being a 44-year-old who's playing at a really high level is really outstanding. You know what I mean? So I think he might be a leader in the clubhouse because, I mean, the usual names of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers didn't play all that great. I mean, Mahomes had a good game. He had a good second half for sure. Don't need to get into that, but it wasn't his usual level of first quarter to fourth quarter brilliance.
Yeah.
So I mean, after week one, I'd say Brady because it's not like the Cowboys didn't come out and give him a game, but Brady came out with the win in that game, albeit I think kind of helped by the refs, but still came out and won that game.
Exactly.
Dark horse candidate. I mean, I'm tempted for the laughs to say Jameis Winston because he just destroyed my team so bad, but I don't truly believe that in my heart of hearts. So, I mean, I think a dark horse contender could be. mm, I mean, every single year we say, but Russell Wilson, I mean, he didn't look, they didn't light the world on fire in week 1 with the score, but he made some really pretty throws. That over the shoulder throw to Tyler Lockett was just
Yeah,
chef's kiss.
my fantasy team loved that too.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I think that's kind of a dark horse because at this point, I think people just automatically assume Russell Wilson won't win it. So that would be one. And then like to go on kind of like another position. Chandler Jones just had 5 sacks. What if he breaks Strahan's record or something
Yeah.
like that? I mean, which is so much more within reach now. I mean, he only needs what?
He needs
17 now?
He
and a
needs
half?
he needs to average like 1.1 sacks a game and he'll break it.
Which he could do.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
entirely possible. I mean, it
Just
depends
have a
on whether,
2-sack game one day and you got it. So
yeah, it just depends on whether he can stay healthy or not.
mhm.
But I mean, teams are going to be scheming to stop him now a little bit more maybe than before, although I don't think the NFL is as reactionary as that. But
Yeah.
what about you?
For me, my MVP candidate, I said at the beginning of the year, I still believe it. Week 1 kind of definitely made it even more strong. Kyler Murray. Like I said that Arizona was going to be really good. And I said that the only way that I can see them being that good is if Kyler Murray is as dominant as I think he's going to be, because I don't think Kingsbury is a great coach, but I think Kyler Murray is going to be a superstar this year. He's going to be an MVP candidate. Week 1, he absolutely balled out against Tennessee. Obviously, Tennessee's defense, but that was a big game that a lot of people thought they were going to lose. So
That was a big game, and that was a butt whooping, like you said. That's the biggest part of it, is that they didn't just come in there and win like they were supposed to. They kicked butt.
yeah, exactly.
So,
So that's why I think Kyler is just my MVP candidate. I'm going to ride with him the rest of the year, which hurts because they're playing Minnesota this week, and I have a bad feeling we're going to get our butt spanked in. But Minnesota always plays their competitions. I think it's going to be a close game. They always have.
yeah, it'll be a good game. And Arizona's weakness, if there was one, it will be defending the run.
Mm-hmm. And
it depends
Dalvin.
if your guy. It depends if your guys' guards can get up to the second level and stop Zaven Collins. And
at least it's not Dakota Dozier. We'll just say that. But my dark horse MVP candidate, I think Chandler Jones is definitely up there. That was if he can continue to perform like that, then it's going to be an insane defensive year. I mean, I think Baker Mayfield, like I know they lost in week 1 to Kansas City.
I wanted to say that too.
But he looked fantastic. Like if people are saying Baker's the issue, the defense may be the issue in Cleveland. I mean, they had 2 touchdowns given up in the second half. That guys were wide open. But even with that, I mean, I think it's just Kansas City and Tyreek Hill is just so much faster than everybody else in the field. But it's just looking at that team. I think Cleveland's going to be very good, and I think Baker just looked fantastic. And obviously, even if I don't think he's the reason that Cleveland's going to be really good this year, he's the quarterback of a team that thinks going to be very, very good. And then I think voters don't like to pick the same MVP multiple times. So I'm not going Rodgers, not going Mahomes, not going Wilson, not going Brady, because I just feel like those guys are what's always talked about in the conversation. And I think that Kyler and Baker are 2 guys that are young guys that would get a lot of publicity. And they're both stand-up guys as well, unless your name is Colin Coward and you don't like Baker, but Colin's a fool. But
Colin doesn't like anyone. So
except for the thick, trunky coastal kids like Sam Darnold. But can't stand him. All right. Well, so now week 3. Week 2, I mean, there's some pretty good games this week. What do you think is the best game of the week?
The ones I've had my eyes on, just for choices, because I want to talk about this, is Seattle Seahawks and Tennessee Titans might have the biggest ramifications, actually, I think, this week, because those 2 teams are fighting for either division leads or they're fighting for wild card spots. So they very well may be end up battling anywhere from like a second seed or a third seed or something like that, all the way down to like a sixth or seventh seed. So whoever loses that game, if the Titans go down 0-2, I think they still end up winning their division just based on the fact that that's not a good division. But that hurts them hard. I don't know if they would be able to recover enough from that to be able to get a good seed. They might end up being like a third or a fourth seed, and then you're playing a really good team in a wild card round, then you have a lot higher chance of losing. Because I mean, in my prediction, I ended up putting Tennessee playing against the Ravens in the wild card round, and I think the Ravens would win that game again. So that's a big game. Cardinals Vikings is a big game, but I mean, I think the biggest game of the week is going to be Los Angeles Rams versus Indianapolis Colts, because the Colts have a better defense than the Bears do by quite a bit. And I expect the Rams to win this one. I guess I should put that out there. But I think I want to see Matt Stafford and that Rams offense against a more polished and better defense before we start crowning them like, oh gosh, they're the favorites to beat in that NFC West, when it's a really stacked team. And people are kind of sleeping on Arizona somehow. All of the hype I've heard this week is how Matthew Stafford is insane and he's doing unprecedented things in week 1 on a new team and stuff, which I don't disagree with any of that. Don't get me wrong. I love Stafford. I think what his performance was great. And I still personally would put them over the Cardinals, but the Cardinals aren't getting talked enough about, in my opinion, for what they did. And the Rams need to put up a good week 2 performance to prove that they're right there alongside the Cardinals for that division win.
Yeah, for me, I have 2 really big ones. I think the reason I think these are such big games, I think it really will tell a lot about a couple teams. I think the game of the week is Kansas City at Baltimore. I think that's going to be a huge game. I mean, it's kind of the cop-out pick. I think everyone's looking forward to that game. But I think the reason I'm so focused on that game is because I think it really will tell us about Baltimore. Is Baltimore as good as we think they're going to be? I know that because they struggled against Vegas, and then you have in the very next week you have Kansas City coming in, who started out a little bit rough against Cleveland, but in that second half looked like as good as Kansas City has been the last. Like they looked amazing. So if you look at that, I think that game's going to be insanely good. I think that Baltimore has a chance to win it. I think I would still pick Kansas City. But I don't even think if I say Baltimore loses to Kansas City, I think that's saying that Baltimore isn't as good as we think they're going to be. I think if they keep it close and it's a close game all the way down the stretch, then that's where I think we'll see if Baltimore's as good as we think. But if they get blown out of the building, then Baltimore could have some really big warning signs. But I think the game of the week, when it comes to implications about who these teams really are, I think that Vegas against Pittsburgh, both teams had some really good wins in week 1. I mean, I think Buffalo is disappointing, and I think Baltimore's a little bit disappointing, but I think both of those teams definitely stepped up and took advantage of it. Which of these teams is legit, I think is what we'll see. I think that if Vegas can go into Pittsburgh and beat them, I think Vegas will definitely make themselves a team to be like a team that you can look out for, and that could possibly beat KC in a game or two in a game this year, one of the two. But I think if they fall to Pittsburgh, I think that Vegas could have been so it was overtime week 1, but I was still very interested, very intrigued by him after week 1. And I just think that game's going to be very, very good. And I guess one other game I could say would be a very good game. And again, obviously I'll be watching the Vikings-Cardinals game. And I think that's going to be a very good game. Is Minnesota's defense improved whatsoever? We didn't see that against the run. They were very good last week. They couldn't defend the pass to save their lives, which is
Mixon still had 120 something yards.
A lot of those are because they were just wasting clock at the end. But I mean, it was a really weird game last week to begin with. We'll know how good Minnesota is. And Minnesota's never been able to stop a running quarterback in their team's history.
Yeah.
And if Kyler is going to play like he did last week, it could just be blown out of the water. But I'm obviously going to be intrigued by that game because they're both playoff teams in my predictions. And I thought that Minnesota would either win this one or win against Cincinnati. They lost Cincinnati, so I think they have a chance to win this one, but it could be really ugly. So Now, what's your upset pick?
Um, I think my upset pick, I would have to go with the Panthers over the Saints. I think the Saints are riding a little bit high after that week one.
Hmm.
And, the Packers defense was just a sack of dog crap there.
Hmm.
And I like the Panthers again. I thought they had a good week one win over the Jets. I mean, it wasn't like super convincing, like they were pounding anyone, but they looked good. They looked like they belonged. McCaffrey looked like he was back. Carolina is one of the few teams that can go head to head in that kind of ball control style offense that New Orleans wants to play with Kamara because they've got Christian McCaffrey.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I would take the Panthers. I don't know if that's that crazy of an upset, but people are kind of going nuts about the Saints after week one. And
Hmm.
another thing is, I was going to actually say this when we were talking about the week one updates, but Quan Alexander, the middle linebacker, and then Marcus Davenport, the defensive end, are both right now on injured reserve for New Orleans
That was 4
after
weeks
the game
out.
against
Yeah.
the Packers. So
Hmm.
that could hurt the Saints a lot.
Yeah. I think my upset pick. I think there's two of them that could be. I don't know if I'd pick any of them. I think I'll have to pick one of them. Um, I think the Cowboys beat the Chargers. I don't know if that's that big of an upset or not, but the Chargers we were both hyped up on pretty high going into the year.
Yeah.
And I think they look pretty good in week one. But the Cowboys surprised me how good they looked against Tampa Bay. I don't know if it's Tampa Bay that didn't look great or if it was Dallas looked really good, but they definitely surprised me. Another game I could see being an upset. I don't know how big of an upset it really would be. I could see Miami upsetting Buffalo. I know Miami won week one and Buffalo lost, but I think most people still think Buffalo's a better team.
I think that would be a big upset.
But I mean, so I could easily see Miami doing that though. I mean, Miami looked pretty dang good in week one and divisional game at home. I mean, that's always going to be definitely be a good game.
Yeah. Speaking of games that would be technically upsets that I don't see as an upset, they have the Bengals line right now is plus 120 versus Chicago. I
How is Chicago the favorite?
I don't know.
I mean, if that's an upset, I mean, I think they're going to definitely win that. I mean, Joe Burrow against Minnesota could be against Minnesota's defense not good. I don't know, but Joe Burrow looked very good. I know that his stats aren't popping off the page, but if you watch the game, he was making throws when needed, which is what I think is most important. I don't care if he threw for 400 yards. I mean, Kirk Cousins almost threw for 400 yards, and I'll say from watching the game, he was irritating the crap out of me because he was checking down half the time. I mean, Burrow was not checking down very much. He was making some 10-yard, 15-yard slants across the middle, crosses across the middle, making some nice throws to Chase and Higgins. So I mean, I think if he continues to play like this, then Cincinnati could be a surprise team. I mean, that team, the defense is very good. Like that defense is a very good defense. The big question with them has been the offensive line the whole time. And if they play like they did against Minnesota, that O line looked really, really good. I don't know if it's Minnesota's pass rush is just that bad, but I mean, Danielle Hunter is there and he just wasn't playing well, I guess. But I think the fact that Cincinnati is a underdog against Chicago is kind of suspect. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I think it's because it's in Soldier Field. I mean, the spread is only the Bears negative 2.5, so it's not like a huge spread or anything.
Yeah, but still,
But
well, that mean well, usually it's a 3 point thing for the 3 points for home field. So I guess it would be if it was in a nature site, they have Cincinnati winning, but
yeah,
I don't think it makes that
uh,
much of a deal. I think Chicago is the bad team or so.
no, I mean, it doesn't even make them. If anything, it might actually. I was going to say this. If anything, Chicago might do worse in Soldier Field than outside because the Boo Birds are going to be out every time Andy Dalton does something wrong. I mean, if Dalton is human at all, which I assume he is, then it's going to be hard to listen to all these people chanting for Justin Fields every single time he does a mistake. That's
Mhm.
going to wear on anyone. I don't like Andy Dalton, but I feel bad for that guy in the situation he's in.
Yeah,
So,
he's in a bad spot. I feel bad for a lot of those transition quarterbacks in that situation.
yeah, Tyrod Taylor is like the most crapped on guy in all of history. That punctured lung last year was just like, ooh, ouch.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm excited. I mean, there was a couple surprises week one. I mean, but week two is going to be I think is going to kind of get back to some normalcy. We'll see who's who. But week one is always fun, and hopefully week two is fun. I mean, college football week this week was amazing, so maybe NFL will follow right up. So
Hopefully.
Till next time, peace.